Matt and Mike, I think some of the questions that were here earlier about Hashgraph versus blockchain, those might be questions you guys might want to chime in on and answer. Those questions come up a lot, and then we'll move on to some of the recent questions that came up. Would you like to chime in on that? Okay.
So a lot of what's going on in the blockchain space, and the previous speakers hit on it
Can you
before.
speak in the mic a little better?
The previous speakers hit on it before, where essentially everyone in the blockchain space is trying to create their own flavor of a distributed ledger, essentially. So you have Hashgraph, you have DAGs, you have blockchains, you have permissioned ledgers, and then you have the public ledgers, and it's basically your own flavor of a distributed ledger, essentially. So it's whatever makes sense to you and your solution. And then that's where you get into cost-benefit analysis of what do you value more, security, speed, and that's essentially what it boils down to, essentially. So, do you want to take
Yeah, so as to follow up on what Mike said, and I completely agree with Mike, when you build out your own blockchain, which a lot of people are throwing the idea out there, what incentives are you bringing to developers to develop on that blockchain? Because essentially, if you don't have developers developing on that blockchain, what's it going to do?
Okay, thank you. Now, going back to one of the questions that came up, what is the biggest hindrance in this space? So maybe some of the legal people can chime in. Jerry? Thank you.
I hardly ever have opinions, but I can try.
Hardly ever have opinions.
So the biggest hindrance in this space is that there are very little controls and circumstantial arrangements that encourage people to act appropriately. Appropriate behavior is circumstantial among human beings, right? If you can operate in the physical world entirely anonymously, you're going to grab a candy bar off the shelf here and there, right? And unfortunately, the entire cyber world has all kinds of opportunities for anonymous behavior, and much of the crypto world is designed to be anonymous. So while that obviously has some benefits, it also shields persons who would succumb to their worse behaviors to be able to behave that way. So you'll get in dynamics where persons promise a certain kind of a token and then blatantly violate their promises. One of which tokens represents the biggest, I think, the biggest risk to the space right now. And you get persons who go on exchanges with bots or otherwise and do things like spoof trading to drive trading away in a certain way. Or they do something called painting the tape, which is they'll get a bot which will buy and sell to it themselves to drive things up. And then they will arbitrage against another exchange. It's the kind of behavior that you saw in equities trading in the 1890s, and the reason why we have highly regulated exchanges now, right? I often tell people about a fabulous book called The Scarlet Woman of Wall Street, which is about Vanderbilt and his ilk behaving the way they now behave in crypto in respect of the Erie Railroad equities. It's an amazing book. You should read it if you want to know what's going on right now. So the biggest problem in this space is that the benefits of anonymity and supposed lower friction of trading and other dynamics presents another side of the coin where everybody's vulnerable to bad actors, and bad actors have a lot of room to play.
Well, I'd like to add a little bit of personal opinion on that question. If Bitcoin can be blocked by any government or any people, it will probably be worthless from day one. But because this is such an open source, decentralized freedom to choose to participate, or anyone can participate, if the government or regulators wants to block it, it will set a lot of roadblocks from its smoother growth at a faster pace. But there's no way all the governments in the world will come together and agree to shut this thing down, just completely block all the entering points. I'm talking about exchanges from fiat to crypto. In the event if that even that were to happen, I think there will still be people using this technology to transact value, exchanging their goods and services. Maybe one day it will come to things that can be denominated into cryptocurrency unit instead of currently everything is denominated into dollar or their local currency. There will always be a group of people that will support this technology, will use this technology. Because there's no central point of failure, it's censorship proof, censorship resistant, so the value will always be there. They can set all kinds of roadblocks to block this, but I feel that the Western governments are extremely open, because now we see that many, Silicon Valley, huge corporations, Wall Street, all of them are in. They see this as more of a benefit than the negative impact what this can bring, even though the banks will be really hurt if this come into play to compete with them. But I think the regulators should be wise enough to see more benefit, more positive impact bring to our human society rather than the negative. That's my opinion.
Joseph, I think
Let me just respond to that, just in case. I am very positive about the space, but I am a natural pessimist and an intellectual optimist. Which creates a lot of awareness, right? So I can see where the risks and where people are gaming the system, but I totally agree that it's just like humanity is not containable. This is not a containable technology, and it has all kinds of benefits. So just because I point out the risk doesn't mean I'm saying we shouldn't be there. I want us to be there. But, like the business that he does is how you can take some efforts to protect yourself.
Okay. Now, a couple of challenges that I do see a lot, and I'd like you, Joseph, to chime in on this, is basically holding and securing your crypto. And that's a problem you actually have a solution for. And tell us about that.
Yeah,
so how hard that is.
If you, for those of you who heard my presentation yesterday, I'm in the hardware wallet business. We are reselling wallets. Basically, these are devices to securely transact cryptocurrencies, most importantly, to protect your cryptocurrencies from stolen from hackers. So currently, these are the best devices to store a large amount of crypto assets, better than any other solutions at this point. But it's not the perfect tool for, it sacrifices some of the convenient features. Like if you use a mobile wallet, it's much convenient to transact smaller transactions. These are designed to hold bigger amount of wealth. And I like to add what I just said earlier is I do really welcome all kinds of regulations, friendly regulations, because this will give the general public a peace of mind. These regulators are here to set rules for the general public to follow, not having bad actors to act violently to exploit the benefit of the general public. So.
Okay, Nicholas, I think you were going to answer.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of echo what sort of the both of you said right in the middle, maybe. I was just going to echo what both of you said, sort of right in the middle, to offer, I guess, a balanced perspective. Super risky, right? But I think it's incumbent until there are regulations for the community to kind of self-regulate. I think at least I'm speaking from like a professional advisor, at least on Deloitte's side, we really try to do that and diligence everything up front, right? Because it's so important that one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch. And so it's important for the community as a whole, all the way through, to keep those bad actors out. And wherever you have money to be made, there will be a bad actor. And so I think, making sure that all the way through from, kind of the gatekeepers that are the lawyers up front, and we have choice ones that we like to work with, right? But all the way down, like you don't want to let anyone in that community. So I think, to keep fostering the innovation. I think, at least regulators in the U.S. have taken a similar approach in that they said, look, this technology is good. We don't want to just squash it, but part of our mission is, right, SEC's mission is part consumer-based protection and part facilitating commerce. And I think they take the second part very seriously. So I think, everyone here from developer up to sort of lawyer, gatekeepers, professional advisors, it's incumbent upon everyone to sort of self-regulate until we get there.
To add on to that, just kind of what you mentioned about bad actors. In the BTM industry, we actually see a lot of our competitors that aren't complying with these money transmitting regulations. They either don't know about them or they don't care. So we try to bring these competitors to the attention of regulators just so that they are aware that there are these companies out there who are basically, whether they know it or not, they're facilitating money laundering because they aren't employing AML and KYC policies. So they are allowing consumers to come up to their BTMs. They do no KYC on them. They don't require them to submit ID. And they let them just deposit tens of thousands of dollars into their BTMs and convert it into crypto. So it is companies like that that definitely cast a bad shadow on our industry. And as lawyers, we really try to discourage that, and we really try to encourage compliance with all regulations, state and federal.
Well, Julia, actually, can you expand a little bit on that? What about, there's certain states that require bit licenses for peer-to-peer
Yes.
selling.
Just New York.
Many do not. And so can you comment on peer-to-peer bit sellers?
So really, right now, New York is the only state that has enacted it's called the BIT license. It's the virtual currency business license. New York is the only state thus far to have enacted a BIT license. Other states regulate money transmission in general. As I mentioned on the panel earlier, whether or not strictly buy-sell transactions fall into money transmission depends a lot on how the state defines money transmission, and monetary value. So it's our jobs as in-house counsel for companies like CoinSource to go and analyze state by state how they look at money and whether or not it could include virtual currency. And depending on how they define money and money transmission, our business model could fall into money transmission, even though we aren't technically a money transmitter. We're not, a middleman right now. We're just buy-sell. It could be viewed as money transmission based on whether or not the state looks at virtual currency as money in their legislature.
So from a policy perspective, I actually think that the banking regulations are very much impeding commerce and people's behavior, and the result is things like you're seeing, where people are retreating to anonymity, which is not good. And so the cost of these regulations, I think, is over the top, and it's also annoying to me that governments think that they can recruit private institutions to enforce their laws, which is essentially what the money transmission laws are all about. To me, if they have a law against X kind of behavior, they should enforce that behavior, a law against that behavior. They shouldn't interfere with the financial world. But the fact is, it is what it is, right? And the government got the guns in many thousands and hundreds and whatever. So we have to contend with it. Now, as a group, this is a perfect example of what overregulation results in. It results in counterintuitive, counterproductive things in many cases. And so I really, if there's any government people here, I would encourage them to think about a regulatory regime that doesn't force regular people into the corners.
So we have one question over there at that corner. Can you stand up and speak very loudly, and we'll repeat the... Oh, okay, Vandana is headed over there.
So Nick brought up self-regulation. I'm just wondering, maybe the Pactum guys or anybody can answer this. What have you guys seen in ways of kind of smart contracts, maybe specifically within ICOs? How do enforce compliance for kind of, to do self-regulation? Are there like KYC, AML ways you can code that in to ensure, only the correct people are contributing?
Okay, this is the last question we'll have time for.
Yeah, in terms of automating that process, right, to make it less. Yeah, so there's several point solutions to that, and I think a natural sort of identity blockchain solution and sort of how you manage your identity, the natural first step for that, right, is KYC AML, right, because that's all the basic information, and there's several things in the works for there. And so I guess the point maybe being that eventually that will become less burdensome, right, and there's probably a blockchain type solution for that I know folks are working on now. But again, to the point of like self-regulation, not letting a bad apple ruin the whole bunch, I think it's super important that the community as a whole be compliant, do the right thing, and everyone here encourages to do the right thing all the way through the ecosystem until that sort of gets there, right? Because you need a relationship with the regulators and you need the right level of regulation, right? And so I think we'll get there, and like the old school paper filings are going to be a thing of the past, but I mean, AML and KYC are important, right? They're important because they prevent bad apples from getting in the banking system. So you need regulation, and we'll get there, but I think it's incumbent upon everyone to sort of do the right thing, make sure the community has a working relationship with regulators to get to the place where we need to be.
So from a developer's perspective, I've actually developed a ICO smart contract that actually had KYC and AML implemented into it, essentially called a whitelist. So what this whitelist did on a smart contract perspective was if you weren't pre-approved and gone through the company's website and through their AML KYC procedures, you weren't added to the whitelist. And if you tried to send money to that smart contract, it rejected your payment. And then I don't know if anyone's out there is familiar with Polymath, but Polymath is out there actually trying to tackle this problem as well. So they want to create a network of regulated marketplaces. So marketplaces for lawyers, marketplaces for developers, and then have those two marketplaces actually place bids on people that want to do an ICO in a security model sense. So if I had an ICO idea, I could go to Polymath, put my contract out there like, hey, I want this token to be created. A legal delegate can go ahead and put a bid in, and then I pay them in Poly token to go ahead and do all the legal legwork. Then it goes to the next step of developers, and the developer marketplace places bids on actually creating their smart contracts on the Polymath network. Then, one more thing, Polymath provides the actual channels for regulation in terms of, okay, if you're in country A, but country B can't participate in this ICO, when you register as not an accredited investor, though you can, investors have to register their network too, and based on their locale, they can participate in these ICOs or not, based on those regulations that the lawyers did the legwork with. So there are, for right now, you can hard code whitelisting into your smart contract ICOs to enforce AML, KYC procedures, as long as they do it on the web front. And then Polymath is looking to tackle the solution on a decentralized global scale.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give our panel a round of applause. And next.